This is a Phob. This is a specially designed GameCube controller made specifically for competitive Super Smash Bros. Melee and Ultimate. What a Phob is, this is a custom open source GameCube controller made by the Smash community. And this is ran by a tiny computer and magnets to make it the best functioning GameCube controller possible. Alright, so this is the Phob's usage in Smash Bros. Melee. Of course, I have it here. I don't have a hand cam, so you guys have the input viewer, you can look on here. Of course, with the input viewer, it's hard for you to really know what the difference is between a Phob controller and like an OEM motherboard GameCube controller, just from the input viewer alone, because I mean, obviously you're not actually holding the controller. So I'll do my best to kind of explain the differences here, and what I think about the Phob, and then I'll go ahead and show it off in Ultimate. The controller is mainly made for Melee, but it does work out very well in Ultimate too, and it also just gives you more consistency too in both games. So it still works in either game, so it's still recommended for both if you ask me. I think most people tell you the same thing. So the one thing with the Phob, for the control sticks, you can actually customize the snapback filtering. Now for those of you that don't know what snapback is, over time, when you use the controller and you keep moving the stick back and forth, it will wear out on you, and essentially the magnets that are in a Phob controller prevent that. So over time, the stick is going to become more loose and loose and loose, and it's just going to make your control stick worse. So you can customize the snapback filtering on this, so that way you can prevent, you know, your stick, you know, kind of going in directions you don't want it to over time, and it'll basically just make your controller more consistent. That's what the snapback filtering is for. So you can change this. There's other tutorials out there on how you can change all that. I'm not going to go over that here, but you can find a bunch of tutorials about that on YouTube, and that's what I found out about it. So, yeah. So there's snapback filtering on that. One other thing the Phob has that is really cool is that you can remap the buttons. So, for example, Z grabs, right? If I wanted to, I could remap this, so I could change Z's function to, let's say, Y, X, A, B, or even L. So I could grab with the L button instead. I'm not sure what the actual inputs are for that on here, so I'm not going to do it on video. But you can find on like there's a whole Phob guide, like it's an image that you can find. There's a Phob Discord. I'll leave it in the description below. There's a lot of helpful stuff there if you're looking to get a Phob. So what you can do is yeah, so if you wanted to like remap the buttons to any other function, so like let's say if I wanted to, I'll use X to jump. Let's say if I wanted to switch A to jump for whatever reason, I could switch the functions of A and X around, which could be really useful for like a certain playstyles in Melee, because as you know in Melee you cannot change your control scheme. It's set to a default, like you cannot change it. A Phob allows you to change it, so you can do that. So that's kind of neat. You know, it gives you functionality that other players won't have. So that's kind of neat. I like that a lot. One thing I will say with the Phob, when you're starting to use it, if you're switching from an OEM GameCube controller, I've only had this for about a day, and I can already tell the differences here. I can already tell that with the stiffness of the controller, it definitely is it's definitely way more stiff than your typical OEM GameCube controller is going to be. It's definitely a lot different. Like, I've already been trying to get used to this over time. Again, I've only had this for a day as of recording this, and I can tell it's a lot stiff, which is something you're gonna want over time, because if your controller gets all loose, it's gonna lead to misinputs. So it's just something that you have to get used to over time. But it's in the long run, it's gonna be very beneficial. Another thing too is with the Phob, it's just gonna make you a lot more consistent. And it just gives you more, basically the Phob entirely for this game, it gives you more consistency, or, you know, prevents, you know, snapback happening. But of course, if it does happen, there's a snapback filter that you can adjust, if that does end up happening to you. And there's a whole lot of other things, you know, you can remap your controller buttons like I just mentioned. And it basically, the whole point of the Phob is to give you more consistency. So for me, someone that just switched from an OEM motherboard GameCube controller to a Phob, I can already say just from a day of having this is probably one of the best investments that I've made. Of course, I'm having some screw-ups here and there, because it does take a bit to kind of, you know, get used to a Phob as you're switching off an OEM, because it is, you know, they're made completely different. But this is, you know, this is a fan project by the Smash community, and I will say they made the best GameCube controller out there. So that's really, really good. So, yeah. So we're now, I'm gonna jump into a online match in Slippy, and I'll, I'll see it. You guys can see me, actually do a match with the Phob, and then I'll kind of give you my whole opinions on what I think of it, compared to an OEM, after I, fix it up here. So, let's find a match here on Slippy, and then I'll give you guys my whole entire breakdown afterwards. One thing I will say about the Phob too, I find with the Phob, my wave dashing has become a lot more consistent too, to an extent. So that's another good thing. I find the triggers are a lot better on here. That's another thing you can do with the triggers. You can actually change them between different modes. So what you can do is you can make them like a digital trigger, turn off analog. There's a whole bunch of modes for it, so you can really customize it how you want, which is really neat. I suppose like maybe digital only triggers would come in helpful in a game like Ultimate, I suppose. Melee, not so much, I would say, because, Melee kind of relies on analog inputs as well if you want to, get the most out of your shields and air dodging. So, I mean, I wouldn't recommend using digital triggers for Melee, but if you're playing Ultimate, then yeah, you most certainly can do that. But that's how I see it. He really hit me back from that. Ah, I missed my downer. I will notice one thing. I find my short hop is a bit more consistent with this, and a lot of my inputs just feel a lot more smooth and faster too. So that's another good thing compared to when I was using my OEM. For those of you that don't know what OEM is, when I say that, I'm basically referring to like an original like Nintendo GameCube controller, because that's what those motherboards are called. They're called OEM. They're just like the official Nintendo ones. That's what I'm referring to when I say that. That wasn't even the way I wanted to angle that either. So yeah, as you can see just from my little diagonal misinput there, when you're switching from an OEM to a Phob, you are going to make mistakes here and there, because it is a different controller that you're using, and getting used to like how, the Phob filters everything, it is going to take a bit to get used to. But in the long run, I can already tell this is going to be like the most beneficial controller I've ever bought. So it does take a bit to kind of, break it in and get used to, but over time you are going to, you are going to like it a lot. And I can already tell just from having it for a day that I already do, so that's a good thing at least. He almost got me with that. Yeah, I'm dead. Alright, so that was a match with the Phob. Now, like I said before, comparing it to an OEM, this really, I can tell just from, I've been using this for a day. I haven't really tested it in Ultimate too much, actually, yet. I've only done a couple games with it in Ultimate compared to Melee. So, describing an Ultimate is actually going to feel like a new experience to me compared to this. So, after using this for a day with Melee, I can say that it is a much more consistent controller, and it feels just a lot smoother than a typical OEM Nintendo motherboard GameCube controller would feel. Again, like I said, I feel my short hops are a lot more consistent, my wave dashes, and, one thing that one of my older controllers suffered from was a bit of stick drift. So I would always miss input, like, let's say a side B into an up B by accident, but now this controller has fixed all that, because, it has the snapback filtering, and of course, if you need the snapback filtering, obviously. But when you first get a controller, it's not going to have it, because, the snapback comes over time. But it still makes, my point still kind of stands on that, because it's just going to make everything more consistent. Because with the Phob, snapback is rarely going to ever be an issue to you. And if it is an issue, you can literally just adjust it by adjusting the controller in the settings, and it just solves everything. So this is the magic. This is magic right here. I will say. So yeah, definitely. One of the things I do like a lot is that you can actually customize this depending on what seller you buy from. But the Z button, the standard Z button on a GameCube controller is not going to make a sound. I don't know if you guys can hear it through the mic, but this is actually a really clicky Z button. One of my older controllers did have it. But one of my other controllers didn't. But this Z button is really clicky and it's very satisfying. I will say that. I like that a lot. I like my clicky buttons. So yeah, there we go. That's that. That's the functioning of Phob and Melee. So that's my whole take on it for this. So let's move over to Ultimate. Alright, so here's the Phob now, functioning in Smash Ultimate. So it's pretty much the same as in Melee. I mean, it's still a GameCube controller, so it doesn't function any differently. The one thing though I do notice, you don't get as much benefit in Ultimate as you would in Melee with the, Ultimate. Mainly just because of how the Phob is, functions. It was mainly designed around how Melee's mechanics works. But the Phob, again, it still works just as well in Ultimate, for consistency's sake. So, I mean, you're still going to get the snapback filtering, privileges. You're still going to get the consistency with the control stick. So it's still going to feel just as smooth, for the most part. So there's really not a whole lot of difference. But the Phob, in general, was designed more for Melee. So yeah, there's that. And, there's not a whole lot to say for Ultimate, to be honest. I mean, it's the same kind of controller, so you're still going to get the same benefits out of it, for the most part. So I recommend when you do get a Phob, if you're planning to get one, if you play Ultimate or Melee, I would recommend just kind of messing around with it a little bit, in training mode or whatever, just to kind of get like a feel for it, and see what, you're working with. But yeah. That's about really all I have to say for it in Ultimate. There's not a whole lot of differences. I mean, it's still going to work just the same. So I guess I'll go ahead and jump into an online match here, and I'll tell you guys what I think about it, compared to how it functions in Melee. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into some Elite Smash. Alright, so we're going to go into Elite Smash here. There is one thing I guess I can mention about the Phob that I didn't mention earlier. So the one thing that Phob does benefit with an Ultimate, I didn't see anyone talk about this with Melee. But the thing is, you can get 1.0 Cardinals with the Phob in Ultimate. Now, what that essentially is, what that means is that, like, so when you're moving the control stick up and down, it's going to be, like, a perfect up and down motion. Now, if you're using, like, an original OEM GameCube controller motherboard, it's not going to, you might be, like, a couple values off that every now and then because, your control stick wears out. So that's another benefit of using the Phob for this. And of course, I mentioned this when I was playing Melee earlier, because it's something that you can benefit from in Ultimate, is the digital triggers. So you can switch your triggers on the Phob to a digital trigger mode. I think that's mode 2. And what you can do that, you can, how like a Joy-Cons or a Switch Pro controller uses digital triggers. Well, you can make it essentially the GameCube controller use digital triggers too with the Phob, and that can be benefit for Ultimate because, like, let's say if you're trying to do like shielding or something, and you do like an accidental like light shield press that you don't want to do, then that might screw you up in the long run. So a digital trigger will always make it so you're consistent with a full shield press because you're not going to have the analog that you're going to have to worry about, right? So that's the whole point of that. So that's another benefit you can get out of that as well. So that's something I would recommend. I mean, if you play just Ultimate and you don't play just Melee, I would recommend using the digital triggers personally. I'm not going to because I'm already pretty consistent with both of them and I play both games, so I'm not going to use that. But if you're somebody that, plays just Ultimate and you have a Phob, I would suggest that you go ahead and, you switch the digital triggers because it will make your experience a lot better, personally. So I would recommend that. And this K rule is really hard to get for some reason. I was never good against K roll online. Oh, we have a teabagger, do we? Alright. I see how it is. We got somebody named Wash and they're teabagging here, and this is content right here. I might be coming for a comeback here, little buddy, so you might want to be careful what you do. There's no way of me getting out of that. And we have the teabagging again. Okay, it's one of these kind of players. Love to see it. Yeah, his tag is pretty relevant for me for Ultimate, to be honest, because I have not been playing Ultimate very much lately. But I'm a slightly bit washed in this game compared to Melee, I would say. This is tricky. Yeah, I always approach with the wrong options against this. Come on, get out of here, you teabagger. I don't got time for you. Oh my lord. That's yeah, I can't recover from that. A teabagger in a video like this. Love to see it. That's true content right there. Anyway, so comparing the Phob with the OEM and Ultimate, like I mentioned, you are going to get the more consistency with the up and down on the control stick. I think it is beneficial for left and right too, but that's more equivalent to Snapback, if anything. So you have that. You're gonna get, you know, perfect consistency with the up and down. Like I can already see just by looking at my input viewer that it's really consistent. Because I remember when I would do this on my OEM, like it would kind of like go down and like curve and all that stuff. But now I can see like it's actually going in a perfect motion. So yeah, that's actually really beneficial. It can actually help with a lot of approaches and stuff. So that's actually really good. Okay. So yeah, you're gonna get a benefit of that, and of course you can do the button remapping with the Phob and Ultimate as well. There's really no true point in doing that though, honestly, because I mean you have your tags, so you can already do that in Ultimate. But I mean if you want to, you can, but I mean it doesn't really serve too much of a purpose here, because I mean you have the tags, so you can already do that. So I mean I guess the only purpose it would serve is, you know, preventing you to have to actually, you know, creating a tag. But I mean, you can't turn off tap jump with the remapping, so if you want to turn off tap jump, you're going to have to make a tag anyway. So that just kind of defeats the purpose of using the button remapping for Ultimate, but it is there if you want it for whatever reason. So there's that. So yeah, other than that, that was the demonstration of the Phob in Ultimate and Melee. And of course, like I mentioned before, if you want to take advantage of the digital triggers, how you can swap between the trigger modes is if you hold down, I think it's like A, R, or B and L, or you can hold down like B and R, or B and L. So it's at least, you have to at least hold down A and B, or, well, you have to press A and B at least, or like one of the two, or at least L or R, and that will allow you to cycle through the trigger modes. There is an image that you can find online, and it's also in the Phob GCC Discord, which I'll leave a link to that in the description below, like I mentioned earlier. It has a whole resource channel in there, so you'll see the instructions for that. There's a whole big guide that they've created that you can go through and tells you how you can cycle through different modes on the controller. So it is really useful. So if you are just a solo Ultimate player, not Melee, I really highly recommend those digital triggers, because those are going to probably benefit you quite a bit. But again, if you're someone that plays both, then I would personally just stick with the analog triggers, because I mean, switching back and forth on them can be somewhat, you know, hectic and annoying. But you know, if you're playing Melee and Ultimate and you're pretty much already used to analog triggers, I mean, there's really no point switching between them. So I mean, I won't be doing that, like I said, because I play Melee and Ultimate, so I have no use for that. But again, if you're just a solo Ultimate player, then I highly suggest you take advantage of the digital triggers. All you have to do is just press A and R, and you'll eventually be you'll be instantly on digital triggers, because that is the first option that you can cycle to, I believe. So yeah. That is the demonstration of Phob on Melee and Ultimate. So personally, as someone that was on an OEM gaming controller for many years, my personal thoughts on the Phob after using it for a full day now, I would say that it's probably, yeah, definitely my favorite controller that I've ever used. And I can't wait to get more use out of this, because this is a fantastic controller. Shout out to the people that made this possible. You guys have done a great thing. And shout out to the modder that I bought this from. You did a really fantastic job as well. So thank you. And yeah, that's about it. And I will catch you guys on the next one. And like what you saw. Like it if you dislike it, and subscribe for more content like this in the future. So other than that, that's about it for me. And I'll see you all in the next one.